for you to search the area. Okay.
Thank you. All right, so everyone is aware that we are being recorded on this town meeting. And I don't know if Jake is able to join us. He had said he could, but maybe with the switching of access, he's fallen off, but we do have a quorum. So we will call the meeting to order. Looks like we have a guest of Eliza McClellan, and John Reel is a guest. Eliza, hi there. We'd love to meet you and say hello quickly.
Unmuted? Does somebody unmute her?
I'm not sure I can. I think it's her own muting. Yeah, I can't unmute her. Well, Eliza, we hope this is the meeting you're planning to listen to. We're the Natural Resources Advisory Board. So if you can figure out how to unmute, we'd love to meet you. Okay, well.
So
yay.
it's not Eliza, it's Herb Height. I talked to John earlier and I thought I would listen in. How are you, John?
Hey Herb, how you doing? Thanks. I'm glad you can join. We got a little snafu trying to get our meeting started. Sorry about that.
Well,
Yeah, I was
welcome.
on at 1, but found out that was not.
So, yeah, Herb, just so you know, he was formerly with Friends of Pleasant Bay. He provided me a lot of information about their harbor survey down there.
Oh, great.
Terrific. Good.
Thanks for joining us. All right, well, we will call the meeting to order. Our agenda for today includes going through the minutes from 8/23/22, a pond update, an open space committee update, the harbor plan update, and some administrative work that we need to do in order for signatures. Oh, Jake's coming. Terrific. Hang on just a sec. To allow some signatures on both behalf of the harbor plan and the pond work. So, hi, Jake.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We had just run through the agenda, which you've also seen, so you haven't missed anything.
Okay, great.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, unfortunately, I might need to go a little bit early. I wasn't, and obviously anticipating a later start.
None of us were, but thank you for
Yeah.
joining us. We'll move things right along since I know this started a half hour later. We have Herb visiting, whose face looks like Eliza McClellan on the list. He's with has been with the Friends of Pleasant Bay and knows John Dwayne. So he's joined us. First order of business, minutes from 8/23. Did everybody have a chance to look at them, and were there any changes as presented? I thought they looked good.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as printed.
Great. All in favor? Okay.
Non-voting.
No, you can vote now.
Oh, how so?
Because John no longer votes, so you're our fifth guy.
Okay. Do I just become a full member, or do I have to go? Because I know in the past with other committees, you had to go back to the selectmen. You don't just like get chewed in, but
John, do you know?
I think as a one meeting at a time fill-in, it's okay.
okay.
But
We'll find out.
I think that ought to be double checked to be sure that what I remember is correct. which it
Okay.
sometimes isn't.
Well, I'll vote for it if
Okay,
I'm in, and then if not, then we can just discard it later.
everyone's fine.
Were you at the meeting, the last meeting?
No, unfortunately, I was away, so I didn't make it.
Well, then you can't.
You
Then you
can't vote
can't
anyway.
Oh yeah, I can't vote on the minutes anyway, but I read them. They look
They look good. That is what we covered too. Okay, let's move to the pond update, which Herb is going to lead.
Okay, good. Laura and I are still in the research phase on drafting the pond management plan. It's it turns out to be a very complicated process for reasons I'll get into as we go through this report. But to start with the research we've been doing, let me go through the recent meetings that we've had and the ones that are upcoming. We met, these are all Zoom meetings. We met with Wellfleet Conservation Trust, Barry Turnbull and Dennis O'Donnell. Primarily, that was an exchange of information of what each one of us are doing and what our interests are. Laura had a very interesting meeting with the chair of the Sherborne Groundwater Protection Committee. Sherborne's a town in Massachusetts on the mainland that has recently created a pond management plan. And what's notable here is it's one pond under consideration, Farm Pond. It looks like about the size in Wellfleet of Great Pond, roughly that size. The pond management plan text was 48 pages. The full plan with all addendum was 120 some pages. I don't think we need to make this a part of the NRAB meeting, that is the plan itself. But if anyone would like to read this plan, both Laura and I have it. And I'd be happy to send any of the members a copy of the plan if you want to see what a truly comprehensive plan for a pond management looks like. It was a very good plan. Daunting. We have,
And Herb, if I can just kick
Yes,
in for a second. The reason that we looked at it is, as Herb mentioned, it's a neighboring town to where I live when I'm not in Wellfleet. But it is a kettle pond. It is sandy bottom. It looks like one of our ponds in Wellfleet. And they're having very much a lot of the same issues that we've been having out on the Cape. And so I just reached out to them, as frankly, my kids go there all the time, and had an interesting discussion, and they sent this management plan that they have, which they view as a prototype for pond management. Sorry, go ahead, Herb.
just as a note on this, it was known throughout its history as a very pristine pond, noted for its water clarity. It flipped in one season to not being swimmable at the moment, so clogged. And that's a little daunting. A meeting we didn't have is with Judith Bruce of the Orleans Pond Coalition. And the only reason we didn't hold the meeting is we had sent her a list of items to be to be discussed. And she sent us back such a comprehensive response and statement of what the Orleans Ponds Coalition is doing and what they're finding, that we canceled the meeting and said, you've told us, we'll come back to you if we need to get more information. We have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with Sophia Fox, the aquatic ecologist of the Cape Cod National Seashore, primarily interested in the status of their editing of their database, which we'll get to in a minute. We have a meeting scheduled with Jane Crowley on October 4th. She's a director of health and environment in Eastham. And we have a meeting that same afternoon scheduled with Sarah Wigginton of Mastic, MASSTC, the arm of Barnstable County that is doing the research in alternative septic systems. Specifically, talk to her about the status of phosphorus removal in septic systems.
Did everyone get the information that was forwarded to me by Dick Elkin? You know, from the Cape Cod Commission had a very extensive presentation on the status of the ponds. Have you guys been working with them as well, or you have been?
Yes, we attended one meeting virtually and one in person that they held.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been very helpful. It's an effort they have now to form basically a coalition of all the pond coalitions and groups that are managing the ponds in Cape Cod. They started that this year.
Mhm.
But thank you, Tom. Thanks for sending. The main complexity that we're running into is that Wellfleet is the only Cape Cod town where all the ponds lie within the Cape Cod National Seashore. Truro's close, but there are a couple small Truro ponds that are that are outside the borders. And the complexity, there's several aspects of this complexity. One is that the Cape Cod National Seashore has an enormous database on all the ponds that are of interest to us and all the elements of water quality that it will be terrific for us to be able to incorporate into our plan. The problem is that database is being edited. They've been at this now for over a year, and the database is not open to the public until they complete the editing. So we know all the data is there. We're not yet able to see it. And to remind everybody, one thing Laura and I are very strong on, and we've seen this in other towns, is that the plan we create has got to be data-based. It's got to be based on a scientific description of what water quality is in a pond and where each pond is. So once we get access to that database, it'll be a great boon to us. Everybody we've dealt with has been very helpful, both in the pond and in the seashore and outside the seashore, and they continue to be. The complexity is the Cape Cod National Seashore administers the ponds within Wellfleet. And the administration follows the guidelines of the National Park Service, which in a nutshell are, I'm going to give a layman's description of it. It is basically in all national parks to intervene in natural processes as little as possible. The other towns we've spoken to have pond management plans with more active management of the ponds. One of the findings we've come across is that several of the towns do undertake remediation of the ponds. Several of the towns have put in aeration or have treated the ponds with a loom to one extent or another. That that is there, the towns have a management approach to the ponds. Where they're on, and also several of the towns we've spoken to have an administrative position in the town government responsible for managing a plan of the ponds. So where there is also a ponds coalition of citizen volunteers, the function of the coalition is to advocate, to educate, to monitor the ponds. But the actual action of administering a management plan lies within a responsibility in the town. Laura, what have I skipped?
Yeah,
missed?
I think that's pretty well summarizes where we are at the moment. We're looking to have the next few meetings that Herb mentioned, and then put our heads together and try and outline where we are with the plan. And then go back to Hillary at Conscom and Board of Health and Suzanne Thomas and chat with them again.
Yes.
Before we come up with a bigger version of it, and then talk to, obviously, our group and the select board.
I have a
John?
question.
Sure.
Herb, you said that the seashore has responsibility for the ponds, or words to that effect. But the great ponds, anyway, are basically state-owned, and my understanding was that the state delegated that responsibility to the town of Wellfleet. So first of all, that's something when you meet with Hillary and Suzanne, might be interested in their point of view on this. And it might be useful to have a memo of agreement between the town and the seashore that clarifies exactly who is in charge of what, because that's important when an action plan is put together. So just think of it. It might be useful to make sure everyone is clear about who's in charge of what. The seashore has been terrifically helpful.
They have.
In doing this, the monitoring, which perhaps the town should have been doing. And I don't want this to be pejorative in any sense. I just want it to be a question of clarification, which will make it easy to move, maybe accelerate the ability to move forward in the future.
Yeah. Okay, I thank you for bringing that up, because I wanted to clarify that I didn't intend to say that the seashore, Cape Cod National Seashore, has been managing the ponds in lieu of the town. It's really the Cape Cod National Seashore has been monitoring the ponds.
Right.
And there has not been, we have not seen a active management of the ponds as exists in other towns. The regulation of the ponds and the lines of regulations in the ponds is so complex, we may go forward without ever having a full answer. For just in one instance, give you one indication that yes, the state did delegate the authority for managing the ponds to the town of Wellfleet.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt for 1 second there?
Sure.
So what you're saying, it sounds like, is that the seashore, the property lies within the seashore, but the town is what I'm understanding here is actually responsible for the treatment and management of the ponds in cooperation with the seashore? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that the way that works?
We'll answer it when we know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can tell you it's unclear.
Well,
And-
because here's the point being is that when you say there's not active management, the National Seashore would be the ones that are treating the, I'm drawing a blank as the plant with the Roundup, the weeds. that
Why-
the
why
Roundup-
don't we-
Phragmites.
The
Right.
Phragmites, right, so they're treating the Phragmites, and that's a National Seashore treatment, is that correct? Are they the ones doing that?
They are.
Okay,
Now, there's also, we have to make a distinction here between land adjacent to the ponds and the pond and the water within the ponds themselves. It is actually unclear, at least to us still, what authority or where the actual authority lies for treating plants or the water itself within the ponds. The state of Massachusetts owns all property underlying the ponds and perhaps the water itself. So it is a little unclear who has authority or whether the Cape Cod National Seashore under what aspect they have authority to treat anything actually in the water of the ponds.
it seems to me that there's a good argument that the state is the one that, the state are the ones that are dropping trout into Gull Pond, isn't that right?
That's correct.
So the state has some responsibility there to make sure somebody must know that that's a good idea, that it's not harming the water in the ponds.
Yes,
I don't think we're gonna clarify this any
All right,
further right at the
well,
moment because we.
Good
keep
luck with
asking-
that.
We keep asking the question.
All right, well, keep
I think
at it.
I think all we're saying is Wellfleet's unique because of the park's presence around all of the ponds.
yes.
The other towns at least have some ponds that are purely within town jurisdiction, but doesn't have the park around them.
All right.
So they have taken a different approach than Wellfleet.
Well, I'd like to reiterate what Herb said before about the fact that we don't want to have an adversarial relationship with
Not
the
at
Park
all.
Service, and that they've been good about, for instance, with the Herring River, when there's blockages about properly letting us cut trees down, remove trees that are blocking the flow. And that's a cooperation. So it's going to be the same relationship as far as I can tell.
Yeah, we very much want the park's input. We want them to buy into what we're doing, help us with it. We're all on the same page here.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
just differentiating that there've been other approaches than what Wellfleet's taken. Is what we've discovered in our travels.
Yeah, ownership comes more into play when it comes to accessing the ponds, parking around the ponds. And so I know the difference between where the water is and where the edges and the access to the ponds are two different things. So yeah, it sounds like a little bit of a tangled mess, but hopefully you'll figure it out.
What I'm concerned about is when action needs to be taken, the town has the authority to drive the action. Maybe instead of talking with the seashore, we have to talk with the state and make it clear or be aware of what authority the state delegated to the town.
Well, the town certainly has the ability, I think through Board of Health, to close the ponds.
Yes, it does. Only
So,
the state, only Wellfleet has.
anyway,
If we're satisfied, then ignore my comment, but I think at some point you're gonna drop a hammer and you wanna make sure it hits home.
fair point. Next thing, Kathleen Bacon had asked that we touch on invasives, and because of our timing snafu, she's not able to join us, but she wanted to know what the park's current philosophy or strategy is. This is not a written thing that we've seen anywhere per se, but we can tell you what we know or think we know.
I'm gonna go pick that
Yeah,
up.
yeah, thank you.
We've had several discussions with Stephen Smith over the treatment of invasive plants, which far and away are Phragmites in Wellfleet. And I had a long relationship with Stephen Smith prior to the NRAB with Gull Pond Area Conservation Association, GUPACA, because that was always a major issue for us. There is now a current approach by the seashore. The seashore is determined that glyphosate is not required, that's Roundup, is not required as one of the two chemicals needed to treat Phragmites. There had always been a combination of two chemicals, glyphosate and imazapyr. The seashore has found that treating plants only with imazapyr is sufficient to eradicate the plants. And as of September 14th, the seashore had just finished treating Phragmites in gull, Higgins, herring, those ponds with only imazapyr. They had also treated Ryder, Great Pond and Truro, and horse leech with imazapyr. And it seems to have been successful in eradicating the plants, the Phragmites in those areas. This is a major change in that the opposition to treatment, chemical treatment of Phragmites had basically been an opposition to using Roundup, glyphosate. However, the seashore also found two plants of purple loosestrife in Higgins Pond, which is disturbing. That's the first time that plant has been seen since 2004. They've eradicated both those plants. So, it would seem that going forward, the Cape Cod National Seashore will continue to treat the pond, the Phragmites in the ponds in Wellfleet only with imazapyr.
That's what we know.
That's what we know.
Any questions on ponds or?
So there does not seem to be any kind of vocal opposition to imazapyr as far as you guys know. I mean, I don't know anything about it, to be honest with you.
I don't either. There does not seem to be that opposition. One of the open items we still have to follow up on is when I asked Stephen Smith for information on the studies which the seashore has carried out on the safety of using either of the chemicals, he has referred me to Casey Reese, who's a regional coordinator for the National Park Service in this area. And he gave me the contact information. That's one of our to-dos, is to get in touch with Casey Reese and try and ask that question. What is the literature? What are the studies based on that give the National Seashore comfort in using this chemical. It must be there. Laura, anything else on that?
I don't think so. I think we can move to Tom Slack and open space if there's any update for Open Space Committee. Thank you, Barb.
Just a couple of things. One is that some property was donated to the town to be used in conservation in a curious sort of way. It's map 42, and then there's lots 125, 126, 127, and 138. And it's some acreage along, I think it's along Blue Heron there somewhere. I'd have to look at the map again. It just went straight through town council, and select board agreed to it. There was no discussion with Conscom or Open Space Committee or anybody else. I mean, we're happy to have property. The only issue is that there's a large structure on one of those lots, which is more than just a little shack. I mean, it's a building that is falling down, I guess, and the Conscom usually would not accept, or at least would be limited in their approach to something like that. So that's being further discussed and what to do about that. There's a couple of other lots that we're looking at trying to protect under Conscom at the next town meeting. Two are off from Payne Hollow Road. One is it's 400 and 505, and 400 borders what used to be called a skating pond, if you're familiar with that area. And it's adjacent to some Wellfleet Conservation Trust land. And 505 is not on the surveyor's map, but it's a strip that's just an access point in there. And it's not buildable property, and it's something that it would seem to make sense to protect under Conscom, and it's not restricting anybody's access to it for recreation and that sort of thing. And finally, there's two lots that we've looked at before, 288 on map 36, 288 and 289, which are down on, there's some marshland area over, well, it's not quite adjacent to Audubon, but it's down in that general area. And so we're looking at that, and we'll be presenting that, I think, before the next town meeting comes up. And that's basically it. There's we're still working on a 5-year plan that will allow us to get some finances from the state, and that's a complicated bureaucratic kind of exercise that a subcommittee is working on. And I guess we had discussion, John, about this whole issue of protecting the upland land that's already protected, and providing bird habitats and clearing of invasive plant species and things of that sort. And I guess all I can say is that we've had discussion. It needs to be worked into some sort of plan, and we'll be working with Denny and the Wellfleet Conservation Trust and Conscom. The Conservation Trust kind of takes the seashores attitude, is just, let's get the land and do nothing to it, basically. So anyway, that's where we are.
Tom, my concern about that, and it applies to the seashore as well, is that leads to to a monoculture. If you look at most of the seashore land, it's all one kind of forest. And successful environments have some variety of sub-environments. So that was just a suggestion to look at the property and see if there's some properties which might entail modification. My standard case for doing this goes to a Massachusetts Audubon Sanctuary in the Berkshires, which was basically all pine forest. They cut down several acres of pine forest for open meadow, and they got all kinds of different birds and animals using that space.
Yeah, that's and to some extent, just over here at the Mass Audubon Wellfleet Sanctuary, I mean, they've cleared some areas, or try to keep clear of scrub oaks and so forth over there on the Goose Pond back trail.
Yeah.
And that has been, I think there are species of birds that you don't usually see because of that.
But I'm glad you're following up and just keep thinking about it.
Okay.
There's an expense involved, obviously, and that could well be the major problem.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions on that or? No? Okay. John Duane, future of the harbor plan.
Okay, I'm going to try opening up some notes that I took earlier and see if this works. Okay. So I earlier today spoke with Herb Height, who's formerly with Friends of Pleasant Bay. And he was very generous with his time. I believe he's still on this meeting right now about their survey that they did. It's the only comparable survey that we have anywhere near us in any, recent time frame. They had a survey that was done in 2014 for Friends of Pleasant Bay. Very similar, based on the same 1960s surveys that were done by Mass DNF. And so they wanted to update that study, just like we're talking about doing right now with the Curley report. So their survey that they did back in 2014, first of all, I can tell you it's the number is, let's start off with the bottom line. It was a 4-part survey, which involved juvenile lobster survey, a benthic study done by Center for Coastal Studies, finfish study, and a seal survey. And the total amount that they spent, all based on donations from Friends of Pleasant Bay, was $187,000, which is substantially more, obviously, than we were looking to budget for our survey. So it was a bit of an eye-opener. And I'm not quite sure whether or not that included $35,000 of in-kind donations from IFAW, who volunteered a bunch of time, which they were estimating at $35,000. So that's kind of like the top line number that I'm coming up with right now is how much the survey is going to cost. And this comes down to how are we going to pay for it? I've approached, with John Reel's help, to our town administrator and our purchasing agent, who both, although are conceptually for the survey, they want to see us, first of all, the suggestion came by that we hire a consultant to figure out how much the survey should cost. I consider that money that's going to be sort of wasted. I just don't see the value in it. In short, what I would like to do is I would like to shoot a letter off. There's this program called ARPA. It's the Rescue Plan Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's a federal program that has substantial amount of money available for things that are COVID related, that have affected communities. And, you know, after speaking with a few people, including our shelters constable, we believe that it's quite possible that we could qualify for ARPA funding. However, the town administrator informs me that there are already 3 programs in town that have requested, and I don't know who they are. It seems to be something that I don't have access to. I don't know why, but we can't find out. There's 3 other entities in town that have already applied for ARPA funding, and the powers to be seem to believe that 4 is a crowd, and that because we don't want to push these people out, it's unlikely that he's not favorable. The town administrator is not favorable to us applying for ARPA funding. And at least in this round of ARPA funding, which unfortunately ends in 3 days, it ends September 30th. So I would really like to try to explore that option until I hear some concrete reason why that funding is not, that it's not appropriate, and that we're going to be pushing somebody else out of funding. It's baffling to me why we wouldn't at least try to get the application in. The worst thing that could happen is they could turn us down. So I would very much like to do that. My proposal is, and I'll be happy to make a motion, is I would like to send a brief email to the town administrator and our purchasing agent indicating the reasons why we really need to get this study funded sooner rather than later. We have a dredging project coming up. We have the Herring River Dike that's going to be opened up, and it's just, it needs to happen. And if we don't apply by September 30th of this year, the problem is that the next round of funding doesn't begin until, you know, quite a bit later in the year. I'm not actually sure when it is, but the other option would be to go in front of the town, a town meeting vote. Town meeting was supposed to have a $75,000 request for a harbor survey that was to be funded by free cash, which unfortunately we all know the free cash wasn't certified, so that got postponed. So in a way, it's probably a good thing that that happened, because it turns out that this survey may cost us quite a bit more than we had initially anticipated. So my simple proposal is, I would like NRAB to be able to solicit 4 companies that do this kind of work. They are, you know, they pick 4 companies in cooperation with, you know, the purchasing agent, the town administrator, and let them pay them through NRAB funds and possibly in cooperation with SPAT to fund, to see how much a survey is going to cost to do and how much they would charge to do the work. So that seems to me we've eliminated a consultant, which is money down the drain. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I can answer any specific questions about the survey, but the bottom line is we all know what it is. It's a survey from 1972 that was done by Mass DMF. And it basically encompasses all the flora and fauna within our harbor. So that is my proposal, is to send out a letter to the TA and the purchasing agent requesting that NRAB be able to hire 4 companies to provide us with estimates for the cost of such work. Not an official request for a proposal, but just an estimate on how much they would charge us to do it. So that's kind of where we're at. I'd be happy to entertain questions. And I would like to thank Herb Height, who was formerly with Friends of Pleasant Bay. He was very familiar with the whole process and the dollar amounts he provided for me and how much it cost back in 2014. So the bottom line is, depending upon how you compare Wellfleet Harbor to Pleasant Bay, this survey could cost us upwards of $200,000. And that's a whole new ballgame from what we were originally planning on. And unfortunately, we're shooting in the dark until we actually get an estimate on how much it's going to cost from those entities that are qualified to perform the work. So that's where we're at, and that's what I'm proposing. Is let me send a letter out to the TA and purchasing agent prior to September 30th, so that if possible, we could submit an ARPA application in time to qualify for funding.
John, do you have, why 4 companies? Do you have 4 companies in mind?
There seem to be 4 companies in mind, yes. I mean, I'm honestly, to tell you the truth, I can come up with a couple of them off the top of my head. Center for Coastal Studies has done the most recent one. They did the one in Pleasant Bay. Horsley Witten would be another one, and John Real, maybe you can help me out with the other 2. I'm drawing, Mass DMF would be the other one, who originally did the one back in 1972. And I'm forgetting somebody, and I just don't remember who it is.
Okay.
But if that's, it's not really up to me, it's up to whoever it certainly should be somebody from New England, and preferably somebody from Massachusetts that's familiar with embayments within the Commonwealth.
Yeah, John, I had 2 quick thoughts based upon, I'm not sure if you mentioned, but how did Orleans fund it?
Donations.
Oh.
They sent out a letter of solicitation for all the Friends of Pleasant Bay is very large, it encompasses 4 towns.
Yeah.
So all those 4 towns that have a lot of members, and it was all done by donations from folks that believed in it.
Yeah, I think it was 2017, Center of Coastal Studies did do a benthic map study in Wellfleet.
I believe you're right.
And the town did pay for that. I think that was a town meeting thing. And I think SPAT donated, I think it was 15 grand at the time. It wasn't as expensive as this. So that is just something to note. Kind of I just made me think of it, the last time something of this nature came up, that was kind of the avenue it went through. And then just one other comment or thought about funding. Have you reached out to the Friends of Herring River or the dredging committee? It seems like we have 2, and I know this isn't exactly part of it, but it seems like we have 2 huge multi-million-dollar projects going on, and a study of this nature, would seem like it might be in their avenue to help us find funding in a way, or maybe kind of latch onto that. It might be wishful thinking, but yeah, it was just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And I agree. There's so much work gets done on the harbor, obviously, with shell fishing being so important. And there's different part of the assembling all the data to complete such a report is going to be involved with taking data that's already there. For instance, I can think of one obvious one, which is our herring count. We have a volunteer herring count every year that's got, 14 years worth of data at this point. So it's going to be a matter of whoever's in charge of the whole project is going to be compiling data from various places. The benthic study, okay, so that's a good starting off point. So there's a lot of stuff could already have been done. But you're right. There's all sorts of avenues. One other one that was that Herb mentioned to me, and I just keep forgetting the name of it. It's called down from Coastal Bay. Read about 35. Okay, Cape Cod, the Cape Cod Foundation, which I hadn't heard of before. They're in Hyannis, and apparently that's another funding source that I wasn't aware of. So there's lots of them out there, and my take on it is, frankly, is that this should be, as recommended back in 1972. This survey should be done every 10 years. That's what they recommended back then. And it's been 50 years, so I believe that this should be a recurring survey that's done so that we can track, so we have a baseline. The baseline right now is 1972. So now we're looking backwards 50 years and what's changed in 50 years. And now from this point forward, I would like to see every 10 years have a new reference point to say, are we getting worse? Are we getting better? Here's some new species coming in. Keep track of what's going on in our harbor. So, and the funding again seems to be the issue at this point. It's a lot of money, but until we know how much it's going to cost, we're shooting in the dark. The only numbers I have to go from right now are the ones that I just quoted to you from Friends of Pleasant Bay from 2014, because all the other ones are so outdated. It's just not, there was one that was done in Salem Sound that was done in like the late 1990s. So that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to get permission from the TA and from the purchasing agent for our board to send out solicitations without being an official request for proposal. It needs to go in front of the town. Is it just to ask them the simple question, is there anything improper about our board hiring 4 companies to provide us with a cost estimate?
John, really, you looked like you had a question at one point during that.
Well, there's a couple of comments. I'd also looked at the work for Pleasant Bay, and a number of the studies which drove up their cost were things that are not part of our harbor plan thinking. Particularly the Benthic study was a big part of the cost, and that's already been done here. So that the piece of the cost that was on in the Pleasant Bay project that's analogous to what we're proposing was about $67,000, something in that range. So keeping in mind inflation, that's likely to be a higher number, but it's and not manageably too high.
So just
The other thing I thought is if we could get some starter funding, we could begin to solicit responses from people who might do the work through a request for proposal process, get underway, and complete the funding either by town meeting or by one of the other ideas that John has. I agree with John that it's important to get this thing started, because the longer we go, we will there'll be a lot of changes in the harbor going on in terms of dredging and the Herring River restoration, and we won't have a good base. We won't have a good baseline. I think the last comment is everything I've heard of. If our funding comes before town meeting, and it's a reasonable amount of money, it will be, all the evidence is that it will be agreed to. So it's really a question of getting this free cash issue settled. So I guess I would, I'm an independent citizen now. I can kind of do what I want, but I think I would try to. I think we ought to look at several pathways, John. I guess that's what I'm saying. Well, let's see what works.
I agree. Here's the one thing I can, when it comes to sending out starting the program, I've got a basic concern, and I think it's been shared by other folks that do this kind of work, is you can't, although the Friends of Pleasant Bay, I will tell you, they started taking donations and did pay for it piecemeal. But, you know, they paid for a little bit of it, and then they got more money and they paid for the rest of it. That doesn't usually fly very well with the companies that perform the kind of work. They want to know that from 2023 to 2026, the work's going to be finished, completed by a certain date. And that's how they budget for the job. So that's one issue. And the other issue is there's a hard stop on a request for proposals until free cash is certified. So there's no avenue for us to send out a request for proposals through the town until the money is certified.
I
So
think
that's
I think I see a way, I think there's a way around that, but I have to talk to Rebecca Ruffley to be sure.
all right. It's possible if I'm open to suggestions for any of it. I think that the point that John made, and I'm trying to stress, is that we can't wait until the April town meeting to get in the chance that the funds are going to be certified. I don't have any concrete reason why we should not be applying for ARPA funding. This could save the town a substantial amount of money. It comes from the federal government, so it's not like it's free. We're getting the money from the government, but if we qualified for funding through ARPA, we'd be saving the town a lot of money.
John, I have no problem with what you propose. My only issue was that the amount of money we would have to raise is considerably less than the total project in Pleasant Bay, and that's
But
just
see,
keep that in mind.
we come right back to the beginning with that then, because we're going around in circles until we know what the cost is going to be, which is why I think we need to send out solicitations to companies, a very brief little solicitation to all the companies involved that would perform this kind of work. How much would it cost to perform such a survey for Wellfleet?
What permission do we need in order to do that?
Yeah, what's wrong with that concept? That's my question to the TA and to the purchasing agent.
You just have to go to the purchasing agent and see if there's a way to do that. I entirely agree with what you're trying to get to. I think I'm trying to get to it the same way with a different path.
Okay, well, so I guess for the purposes of this meeting, I guess what I would like is permission to follow that avenue of thinking with the purchasing agent and say, is there anything wrong with this? Can we try to do this before the end of the month with ARPA funding? And what is wrong with us sending out a solicitation for a cost estimate, not a request for proposal, just a cost estimate for the scope of the work to be performed?
Herb?
I kind of echo Laura's question, and just you can help me and help us further down the line. Implicit in what you're saying is that the NRAB as a unit cannot go out directly and ask for the request for proposal. It has to go through the town purchasing.
Yes, a request for proposal is an official procedure that's done through the town.
Right, but we can't even ask for cost estimates is what I was asking.
I don't know. That's a question. If the answer is no, then I don't understand why, but we until we do that, we're in a holding pattern. There's nothing that we can do because we're being stymied by not being able to apply for ARPA funding.
So does anyone have a problem with John going to the town and saying, hey, can we at least get cost estimates? So we know what we're asking for. John Rail, go ahead.
Just please remember in our charter, which was upgraded at the last town meeting, we're the Natural Resource Advisory Board. Yeah, we advise the town.
Right, we're not a regulatory board.
Yes.
So is this outside our scope? Is that what you're saying, or?
We're an advisory board. We give advice. We can't request funds.
Yes, no, understood. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear in my question before. As the NRAB, we cannot go out directly and ask for a cost estimate of doing something? That's really what you want to do.
That's my question, and I have not heard, and I haven't sent that query in yet.
It's hard to advise if we don't know what it's going to cost. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. We can't really, again, they've asked in the past, where did we come up with $75,000? And we had some basis in reality for doing that from past conversations with contractors, but nothing was in concrete. And now that I've got the numbers in front of me for a similar study that was done, I was tempted to just bump our 75 up to 150 before I even got this information from Friends of Pleasant Day. And now that I know what they paid for it back in 2014, I'm hesitant to even, 150 seems low.
So
And
let's come
maybe-
to a consensus. Is everybody feeling it's appropriate for John to go to the town and say, is it all right for us to at least get cost estimates, so then we know what we're looking for?
Laura, you made a good point. We can't advise without facts.
Yes, Laura,
You
I
should-
agree that somehow or another, NRAB should be able to go out and
I think
get
so too,
a cost estimate. You and I are gonna run into the same issue.
with the ponds,
Couple
right?
months from
We
now.
need to know the answer.
Yeah, can you go out and request 3 companies to give you a cost estimate for doing this? And can you do that directly without going through the purchasing agent?
There you go. I invited, by the way, the purchasing agent and the TA to join our meeting. I know that I got a message back from the TA saying he couldn't attend, but it's a question, and I'd like to ask that question. And just so that you know, there was 4 parts of the study that were done in Pleasant Bay, and here are the dollar amounts. A juvenile lobster study was $7,200. The benthic study, which is the one that we believe we already did, but already Mark Pirelli did, for $69,800. A finfish survey was $64,600, and a seal survey done by Lisa Setti was $45,700. That all adds up to the $187, plus $35,000 in kind from IFAW.
So do we need to vote for John to do it, or can we just say, John, go find out what permission we need in order to ask for costs?
Yeah, but specifically to send out a request
For cost estimates?
estimates.
Yes.
I'll make a simple motion that I be allowed to approach the purchasing agent with the request to send out proposals, a cost estimate to 4 companies suitable for, I can't come up with the wording now, 4 companies that are capable of providing a survey.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Okay.
Let us know what you find out.
I will. And, again, I still, I'm not holding out hope, but there's a deadline coming up on the 30th for ARPA. And if we can get that application, and that's going to be a big step forward.
That's the end of this week, right? So,
Yeah, it's the end of this week, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
okay,
there's always another round, but that's again, it's just more delays. And I just don't understand the reasoning, and I also have not heard who we're competing with in town. Apparently there's 3 other major projects. 'Cause
well,
these
maybe
are-
I'll suss that out too.
Yeah, maybe I can figure that out too. All righty.
I know Jake has to bop off pretty quickly, so let's try and get the 2 positions sorted out for signing on behalf of the NRAB for ponds and for harbor. John, you said you had something you wanted to bring up on that, John Reel?
It had to do with the second one, so go ahead through ponds and then we'll talk
Okay.
about the second one.
Herb and I chatted on this, and he was suggesting that I be the signature on ponds since I live closer to Wellfleet. I had to go down and actually physically sign something, so I'm fine to do that as long as that works within the NRAB rules. Is that
You have
fine?
to, do you have to be a resident of the town to sign for that?
That's what we don't know. We were gonna double check that.
John, do you know? John Real?
If you
I think
do,
you could
it's
be
John
an
Blaine.
a fully active member of the board. You should be able to accept any responsibility, but no harm to ask.
So we will double check, but if that's a okay thing, I can do it. If not, I think it's John or Tom. Or Jake.
Well, you need another signature anyway for, right, for anything related to the.
For the
Harbor?
harbor, it's gonna be somebody else, yeah.
Gentlemen,
I don't mind signing for the harbor survey. I mean, I don't mind signing. It's not obligating me for anything. So as a default, I don't mind doing that. This is actually something that would just be through the Cape Cod 5 where I would need to get my signature on file with them. Is that right?
We'll find that part out too.
John Real, how often did this?
I think first of all, let's have a motion and a vote about the pond issues, and then I'll talk about the other issue.
About Laura signing for the pond?
Yeah,
I'll make a motion that Laura be authorized to sign for any issues relating to the ponds.
I second that.
All in favor? I vote for myself.
Aye.
Okay. I make a motion that John Dwayne be the authorized representative to sign for issues relating to the harbor study.
there's a little there's an addendum in here.
Okay,
Wellfleet Harbor Conference. When the Wellfleet Harbor Conference was started about almost 20 years ago now, the main drive behind that came from NRAB and other citizens in the town. And it was convenient in managing the funds for myself as chairman of NRAB at that time to go to the town accountants and say, can we use your facility, your ability to manage funds to deposit donations and to write checks? And that's worked fine up to now. We haven't had any reason to do so over the past couple of years because there was no money spent. Everything was done online. And the other thing is that most of the work now is done by Mass Audubon. But Mass Audubon is not willing to undertake this responsibility. So I would suggest that the NRAB appointee be appointed to sign for harbor issues and for Wellfleet Harbor Conference issues. Which means making donations for making deposits for any funds raised, and writing checks through the town accounting office for any expenses. In the past, that worked. It worked very easily. Just go into the office and say, we need to do this or that, and it was handled quite smoothly. So I would say for harbor issues, including the survey and also Wellfleet Harbor Conference issues.
okay. John, you still game to,
That's fine. If somebody wants to make that motion, I'll be happy to do it.
okay, I'll make a motion that John Dwayne be the person to sign on behalf of the NRAB for the Wellfleet Harbor Conference and harbor-related issues.
Second.
All in favor? Okey dokey.
John, at some point, I'm gonna need to go over where our money comes from and anything else I need to know about what's going on with funding.
I'll be glad to review that with you. Since we haven't spent any money in the last 2 years, we haven't raised any money either.
Maybe it's time for a party.
We're not talking big funds. The total amount of money is 1,300. so-
I know, but it's something.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, folks?
Oh, how are we going to avoid the problem we had earlier today in the future?
Rebecca's going to send instructions on how to make one of us or who's ever chairing the next meeting host.
Okay,
So that
And
she doesn't have to be the host and assign it to
and you
us.
are our acting chair at this point, is that correct?
I certainly was today, yes.
Okay, well, we're happy to have you.
We can decide if we wanted me to do another one or we want to switch, or I'm as you wish.
Be careful, if you keep doing a good job, it may become permanent.
Thank you, Laura.
I think she's doing a great job.
All right, we'll look to meet with somebody in the chair seat the end of October. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
I'm going to stop the recording and say goodbye, everybody.
Take care.
Good.
Bye, everybody.